Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to AES Nashville's Legends in the Round, highlighting Hilltop Studio. And getting over in front of the camera. I'd like to welcome you all for coming and thank you for coming. I'm going to turn it over to Bil VornDick in a moment. Just like to remind any of you who aren't AES members to consider signing up. It's one of the greatest fraternities, sororities, groups of friends and mentors that you could possibly hope to be in this town. I'm real grateful for AES. And even more importantly, if you're a member, and even if you aren't a member, if there's tech meetings, subject matters that we haven't highlighted in the last couple of years of tech meetings, please let somebody know. Send us an email at aesnashville.org because we'd like to hear anywhere you think we haven't highlighted something that's really important in our industry these days. We're trying to branch out more to live sound. We're going to be looking more at immersive, sampling, a lot of other things. We're trying to bring the students sections in even more so and involve them. We had about 100 kids in the same room not very long ago. Was it in this one? Yes. Yeah, okay. Anyway, and I'd like to introduce Michael Hansen. He's our chairman of the committee, and I'm vice chairman, and I'm going to turn it over to Bil VornDick now. Thank you.
Hello everybody, we're going to go back to about 1963, and to my right is Gene Lawson. We have Kevin McManus, Steve Chandler, John Nicholson, and Billy Linneman. And Billy, we're going to open because your dad became a member of the Lifetime Achievement Awards that we had at the Country Music Hall of Fame. And just to show a little bit of that, we had the video of Johnny Rosen.
Yep. My name is Johnny Rosen, and my very first studio job was with Jack Linneman. And what they didn't tell you there, he was in a group called Waldo and Purd. He was Purd. I've never heard of a musician named Purd at that point. But he was a great musician. He worked out at Starday, and Starday was a really unusual place in that it was a little incestuous group of people that worked together over and over again, got to know each other, same group of musicians, same people running the record company. And there was a couple of characters. One of them was Tommy Hill. And I don't know what Tommy's background was, but he had a great Ford antique car, and he had a briefcase with 2 pistols in it, in case somebody took one away. And Jack could make friends with anybody. He was just one of those guys that somehow or other, if you didn't like him, something was really wrong with you. And he just did a great job. You know, Hilltop, they talked about, and the echo chamber gadget that they referred to in there basically was a ripoff of an EMT, but he built it with all sorts of strange parts that he found, and one of them was a little Radio Shack wall resonator. It was a speaker magnet without a cone, and it had a little screw, and you screwed it into your wall, and the whole wall would become a loudspeaker. And that's what he used as the driver for the echo chamber, and it really sounded great. The other thing that Jack did that was unusual, it was the only console that I'd seen, well, I hadn't seen many consoles anyway, but it was the first console I'd seen, and for many years this was true. He had monitor switching in the console. Before that, everybody had to switch over on the tape recorder to hear the right thing you want to hear. He had that built in. There's a little switch panel over on the side that he built. It wasn't labeled, you know, the not quite complete thing. But it worked. And he was a brilliant guy with great musical skills, and he was a forward thinker.
Okay, we're going to move on to one more little short snippet of Mike Porter doing the intro on Jack.
Next up, Mr. Jack Linneman. Fashion statement of before his time. I'm almost afraid to think of what that might look like were it being done with today's fashion standards that we're seeing on the internet in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Jack moved here from Sacramento, California in 1951. He was a musician, played dobro and steel. He was hired by Starday, by Tommy Hill, and played on sessions with his son, Billy Linneman. Billy's still active in the industry. And while I was researching this, I was having a little bit of trouble finding some information, but I finally stumbled across a reference to him as Hoss Linneman, which led me down another rabbit hole to a book. And found the book on Amazon. I thought, I need to buy that, and it was a little more than I wanted to pay for a few lines. But we have a research author in our building, and I called him up and I said, "Hey, have you ever heard of this book?" He said, "Well, who wrote it?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh yeah, I got it here." I said, "Well, can you find it? Because you've ever been in a research author's office, you know what a catastrophe it can be." And by the time I got upstairs, he already had the book out for me. And Jack was a recording engineer and also built studios and also built equipment. And the funny story out of this sequence of events here, where I'm leading you to, he developed a reverb unit, an echo unit that was used on a number of albums, and to the point that Columbia Studios and RCA Studios started calling, finding out, what is this reverb unit that you're using? We're interested in it. And he said, and so Jack said, "Well, it's one that I built." "Well, we're interested in buying them." So here came the ideas that, well, there's a business here. And Jack flew by the seat of his pants in building this. He said, "Well, I have to figure it out, and I'll make them." So he sat down and took it apart, and then didn't remember what he did, how to get it back together. So all those dreams of another reverb unit that we could be having as legacy equipment today went by the wayside. And that's not unusual for us that are in this industry to do stuff by the seat of our pants and then forget what we did in the end of that. So Hilltop is now Nashville's longest running recording studio. Still very active, and we'll hear from the owner of that in the video.
All right, Billy,
Yes.
how did your mother react when your dad came home and said, "Look, I'm going to build a studio in the basement, we're going to live upstairs"?
Well, first of all, can I tell an awful story?
Sure.
But in the 3rd grade, I was sleeping, I heard this pounding. And it was guys pounding stakes down our property to build Interstate 65. Well, that was 1953. They didn't buy the property till 59. And they resurveyed it 4 times. Government money at work right there, and the stakes never moved more than 5 feet. It makes me mad every time I think about that story because of all the money wasted on doing it. So we sold that property, which was right around the corner actually, long way. Back then it was a dead-end road. But right now the road goes right up and over to due west and right half mile to the studio. But I don't know what was in his mind to build a studio. I mean, I can't tell you what my mother said. Probably not too happy about it, I would think. But it got built that way.
So you're about 3 years old or so when...
I never knew what was in his mind to do it. So I can't tell you. Long gone.
So, I do need to correct something. Cinderella Studio is the longest running studio, I understand, in town. And this would be the second.
Well, that's interesting, only because we put the original board in Cinderella.
Oh.
That's before all y'all. UA Modules was the original board that we sold.
Okay, well then I was...
Sold away, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying.
Okay. All right. Gene, you were there for the wiring and everything, or?
No, it was wired when I got there. I arrived about 1971,
Okay.
71, 72 there, and I stayed at Hilltop until about late 75, but December 75. So it was already wired up, but
We got a picture of you at the console that's going to be coming up
Yeah.
here shortly.
that's the console.
There you go. Could you describe the console?
Well, the console was an operational amplifier that was brought to town by a Cincinnatian. I guess he's from Cincinnati.
Dave Harrison.
Dave Harrison, yeah. Dave Harrison brought that card, that op amp. I've got a copy of the actual original circuitry. That's neat.
Here it is.
And there it is, right there. It's basically a discrete operational amplifier. Unfortunately, it had a slew rate of about a half a volt per microsecond, it was capable of doing plus 24 dBm into 600 ohms. So, but it was very quiet, and it had a lot of punch, so it got a lot of use around town. Studio Supply had their own version. But that's basically it. In other words, that op amp served throughout the console. There were cards with a 10-finger connector, edge connector. And
Yeah, people do that as an MCI console.
yeah.
Sold it to MCI.
I came from Cincinnati, Ohio, and Dave Harrison was working at King Studio at the time. He and Ron Linhoff were constantly puttering with solid state amplifiers for studio use. You got to remember that before that time, everything was vacuum tubes, and it was a lot of people were dragged kicking and screaming into solid state because it just sounded so different from a vacuum tube.
Well, Dave came down and actually worked for us for a
Right,
year
right.
while he was
Making that console.
drawing all the stuff out and making that console
Right.
for us before he presented it for sale. And of course, we know that
Yeah,
MCI got it.
When I moved here in 71, Dave and I had long conversations while he was in Cincinnati about electronics, but when I got here, one of the first things he showed me was this module that was the original, that he had designed for MCI for the original 416 console. And he was very proud of that. And
He should be.
rightly so.
But if we could go back to the earlier picture, because if I counted right, there's 5 1176s and 2 LA 3As.
Yeah, it sounds like.
Well, there's a reason for that.
Okay, and the reason is?
We were dealers.
That's right. And you were 4-track at the time?
This is possibly 16 track. I know that
That
other
was
photo, I mean, the
16
black and
track.
white photo that I brought back, you can see it's a JH16, the MCI 16.
Which was machine number 2.
Yeah, you had 8 track before that, as I recall. So, and the clip horns came out of my living room. I still have a pair in my living room, so.
Is that why Ray Pennington had clips in his office?
Well, Ray Pennington, again, is another Cincinnati guy. I played in Ray Pennington's band. He called himself Ray Starr at the time. I was his drummer. So,
Because he recorded there a lot, didn't he?
Yes,
yeah,
he did.
yeah.
I met Ray when I was at Hilltop, probably in about 1980, and he had started Step One Records, independent label in town that had done real well. And so Ray brought Ray Price. Billy Walker did a project in there. Oh gosh, I can't begin to tell you who they were. At my age, I can't remember.
Buddy
anything.
Evans did the swing band stuff.
Yeah, we did,
Ray
that's
had
right,
a
we
wonderful
did that.
singing voice. I mean, he really admired.
Yeah, He was better as a singer than most of the people that he brought in there to produce.
Yeah.
It was excellent. But back to the story you were talking about, let me just tell you the other side of the Dave Harrison story that I know. I worked with Dave Harrison the first time. He was an engineer at Criteria in Miami, and I did my very first recording session as a musician in that room, and Dave was the engineer. And he and Jeep from MCI they had their heads together and were working on this 414, but Criteria became kind of the proving ground for MCI.
Right.
Had all their machines, all the machines in there were Ampex decks and the JH5 electronics that Jeep was making.
Yeah, they made a lot of money copying the 440 electronics from Ampex, and they take old Ampex 300 decks and make 4 and 8 tracks out of them, 16 tracks, using those solid-state Ampex electronics. And in fact, the JH16 that you saw out there, you could take those cards out and put them in a 440 or vice versa, and they'd work. So that's how close they were.
Do you have anything to add there, Billy, on, let's get back to like wiring. Did your dad do all the wiring?
Yes. Yeah, he did all the original wiring. It's
Which I'm
probably,
still fixing today, by the way.
be quiet, be quiet.
John's the present owner of Hilltop.
So, he wired it all up. It was rewired several times. We were in the field, and Starday had the same problem of WLAC
Yeah.
radio.
Close proximity, wasn't it?
Yes, and it came through sometimes when you didn't want it to come through.
So do you know?
You had an automatic radio.
It picked up on
Well, no, I know how.
microphones and everything. I mean,
But how did he shield it?
you just move stuff around and, put it over here, and it's quiet, you leave it there, it goes over here and it gets louder, you put it back.
I didn't know if he had put a wire cage and grounded it that way.
I don't think so. I don't think there was a very shield around it. I don't think so.
Most of it's with your nighttime pattern.
We continually, we rewired the whole studio at one point in time.
Was that before or after the fire?
No fire.
Yeah. The fire and the seats had all the dimmers that
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
had too many of them tied together on one circuit.
They got a little hot.
Yeah, if me and Alan Smith hadn't have been there, it'd have burned to the ground.
Alan Smith,
Yes.
first engineer
Yeah.
was Alan Smith. He actually lived across the street from us.
Yes, he did.
I think he still does.
It still lives there, yeah. So we had a lot of fun.
Well, the next question for me is Starday was there on Dickerson Road, and within a quarter of a mile, your dad that worked at Starday built a studio. Was there a problem at Starday, or?
I don't know.
Okay.
And I don't know, there was a problem
always
at
curious.
Starday,
Yeah.
because Don Pierce wanted to eventually sell. And I think that got into everybody's mind, well, what's gonna happen to me if he sells? So, but that's not what, my father had already designed the studio. Why again he did, I don't know. But it was in there.
The studio was built right. I mean, it had these concrete poured in place, like T-bar construction.
Yeah.
So it was built on the side of a hill. I mean, it was very soundproof outside.
You had to put your ear on the block to
Yeah,
hear
you
anything.
wouldn't hear anything from outside.
I can't remember when we enlarged the control room and tried to take that wall down.
You won't talk to Mike.
Okay. When we knocked that wall down to enlarge the control room,
Yeah.
it was so heavy we couldn't bust it up. We couldn't get it out the door, so we had to build a new one over the old bond beam. Yeah, it's still there.
There were no isolation booths at all.
No.
It was, that was basically the style around town at the time, is that everything was out right out in the open. the piano and the drums were not more than 5 feet apart.
Right. Rhythm guitar in front of the
The
drum.
guitar in front of the
And beside
drums.
the piano. That's right.
Kevin, could you give me those? And I'm gonna
Yeah,
Things have changed.
have so that people can pass them around while we talk.
sure. Whoop, sorry about that. I've done this before, excuse
So,
me.
Gene, you're famous for your plate and your microphone. Did you experiment with plates here?
Well, yeah, before I got to Nashville, I was experimenting with plate reverb. Of course, it was patented. And, but you didn't, you wouldn't let those folks know that you were messing with their patent. But in 1979, when the patent expired, anyone is free. It was, well, the patent run at that time 17 years. So at that point, when it's expired, anybody's free to use it and manufacture it. So that's what I did. I manufactured a plate reverb that was sold under the Audicon name in town, and we sold quite a few of those. So
I still have one.
do you? There are still some out there. There's one at Ruckus Room, formerly the Reflections, my studio in Berry Hill, and it's still an excellent sounding unit. There's nothing quite as dense as a plate reverb. I mean, the reflections occur. It's about 6 feet in air. That's how fast the first reflection comes, and then it builds to the square of time, where a real room would be to the cube of time. And but the ear can't tell the difference between that, and it's so the reverb is incredibly dense, absolutely perfect for using something like a wood block or something very extremely transient, and you get this wonderful tail on the thing where you do it on digital, and you get that kind of stuff going on. And so plates have a special place. You know, they are really quite
Natural talent.
very natural. Yeah.
So Kevin, is that you with Pat Boone?
Me with that one?
No,
No. Anybody know who that is?
that's Martin Harley in between Pat and,
The guy on the right is.
I don't know the guy on the right. I probably do, but
How many of you all remember who Pat Boone is?
Martin Harley was the vice president
You worked with him for 3 years.
of,
I did a gospel album at some point with him in there.
Martin Harley was vice president at Starday. And then he went off, moved to LA, and started his own company, CMH, which recorded
Yeah, did all their stuff.
right there. Recorded at his,
Yeah.
so he brought in a lot of business. He remembered escaping Germany during World War II.
Well, I was going to move on to some pics of, try to stir up some ideas for some sessions that you all might have done. This looks like
Yeah,
a crew.
that's, we had a production company for a while, and that's them. Jerry Whitehurst, Paul Sharon on drums, Jeff
It was
Newman
Paul
on
what?
steel,
Paul Sharon.
my secretary, well, all of a sudden I can't remember her name. Huh? Betty, yeah.
Is that
Myself, Johnny Gimble, my father, and Jimmy Caps.
That's a young Jimmy Caps. What year was that?
Probably around 70. Who engineered those? Did my father
He
engineer?
must have.
Yeah, probably was. You played bass on it, right?
I played bass and mixed some of them.
We got another one coming up with Buddy Emmons.
That's the one you mentioned. Who mentioned about that?
I think Kevin engineered that one.
I have.
Gene Crispin on the right. Buddy,
Buddy
fiddle
Swank.
player.
Buddy
Buddy
Swank.
Swank,
David Smith, big. Who's that with the hat on?
I don't know, Pete Wade down front.
Then we have another one of Buddy. Buddy looks like he spent a lot of time there.
Not only as a player, but he was an artist with Step One, the Grace Company. So they recorded several projects on Buddy. Got a Christmas album that's really good. And I remember the title of the other ones.
There's the Ray Price album you mentioned.
Yeah,
Big Grace City.
did that.
That was a big seller for Step One.
So I kind of juggled my time in between recording TV and engineering and mixing. So I wasn't around the studio all the time. I don't know how much y'all saw me. Enough, yeah. Too much.
So Kevin, you came around, was it 1972? And Jack was the engineer and you were the producer.
Right.
Could you tell us how that happened?
Well, I had a partner at the time that also ended up in Nashville. We were living in South Florida. We started a production company. We did custom recordings. But we wanted to get the Nashville players. We wanted to use the Nashville players. So somebody had told us about, I think Bud Renault. Anybody know?
Bud Renault.
Bud Renault. We made contact.
Cincinnati.
Yeah, another Cincinnati, that's right. Yeah, so we had gotten in touch with Bud Renault. He said, well, I can get you all the players you want, and I got a studio we can use. So we came up here in about 72 and did a couple custom sessions, and Jack engineered. Well, the fellow that was with me, his name was Dave Aranis. Anybody knows who Dave is? He also ended up here in Nashville as an engineer. But Dave and I were fledgling engineers at the time. Jack saw that we knew enough about it to where he could turn us loose and not have to worry about it. So he said, next time you guys come up here, he said, why don't you engineer your own stuff? So we did, and of course we welcomed the opportunity, work with great players like that in a nice room, and so we did, and I had done a session, another custom session in Cincinnati, in a studio called Counterpart, and Gene was the engineer. And so I followed that up with a session back in Nashville at Hilltop, and Jack came to me and he said, hey, you ever heard of a guy named Gene Lawson? And I said, oh yeah, actually I just worked with him up in Cincinnati. He said, well, I think he's gonna come to work here. And of course, he did, and I continued my relationship with Hilltop, but I had another commitment. I was on the road with the group. And I ended up coming up here, I don't know, the end of 75, 76, whenever it was, that you were building Oak Valley, nobody knew about it.
I left late 75, so.
Okay. That was when I moved here then.
I have a note saying, was it you that recorded in 1976? It was Halloween night.
Razzie Bailey.
Razzie Bailey?
Yeah.
So that was,
This is
that,
Razzie Bailey.
we're pretty close to an anniversary here.
Yeah. That's right.
And that's the tape?
I don't know.
It's not, this is I just pulled a mix off of the board one night because I like the tune, and I like to take the stuff home and listen to it on my own speakers to review stuff. But that's a Razzie Bailey tune called "Keeping Rosie Proud." Now I don't know whatever happened to that thing, but Larry London played drums on it. It was an excellent track.
Well, the project that I did on Halloween night ended up getting him the deal with RCA. I do know that. So he had a pretty good career, and it all started right there.
Do you remember what the song was?
No, I sure don't. He was working in a club in Macon, Georgia, and he had Sundays off. And he would drive all the way up here, record half the night, and then drive back home. And it was on a Sunday. Halloween was on a Sunday, and I did the session that Halloween night.
later on, I engineered some stuff with Rosen.
Did you?
Yeah, and actually went with them to, when Reggae was hot, went with them to, where was that Reggae from? Trinidad or one of those countries, because he was afraid that he wouldn't have a decent engineer down there. Well, I got down there, and the engineer was great, who moved here, and now I can't think of his name. So I didn't have to do anything except for go out by the swimming pool for a week.
You had a swimming pool? You had a swimming pool?
Well, no, where we were staying at, down there, which was, you didn't go outside of about a mile area. UN was meeting, and in the paper every day, in the right-hand quarter of the paper, told how many killings, how many rapes, a whole big lineup from, I'm trying to say Haiti or Dominion or Haiti. It was in Haiti. And all the guerrillas would go up in the mountains during the day and come down at night and rob and steal and kill.
What was Rezzy Bailey doing down there?
Doing the reggae music. Because he wanted to go, I mean, they used their musicians. He wanted to get the real thing. Now, whatever happened with that, I don't know.
Do you remember doing any,
We've come a long, long way on this East Texas highway, and I'm feeling a whole lot older than I should be. But Rosie's sure been good for me. Guess I showed them what I had to do when I wrote everything in Houston. Boy, was Rosie proud of me. Just a broken down.
That's what he was.
That's what he did there.
Yeah, no, not down there.
That's the trouble.
That was done at Hilltop.
Oh, okay.